Okay, so now we're going to talk about a term called encapsulation. It's kind of the black box theory. There's a lot of different terms for it, but what we're really trying to do now is explain why would I want to set something to private? Why would I want to set this variable, num dogs, only available to this class? Well, let's take a look at this example first of all. If I did not set it to private, and I allowed it to be available to my make animals. Okay, so now the idea behind count behind this variable was that it was supposed to keep track of how many classes, how many different instances of dogs was created, and the idea was that every time a constructor was run, it would add one to dogs, to num of dogs. Well, that's great, but because it's available, it's not private, it's available. If I were programming this code and I needed to falsely increase the amount of dogs that were created in my variable, for example, I could say dog dot num dogs plus equals to 20. Or something. You know, I don't know why I would want to do this in this scenario, but think about a banking object where I have a balance. I don't want to give access to the balance to somebody who would have access to using my classes. I don't want them to falsely increase the balance. I want to have control over the balance within my class. I want to keep it private to my class, but still give somebody access to it. So, in other words, I wouldn't want them to be able to add 20 to the number of dogs. I need this number of dogs to just be able to automatically track how many were actually created. So, if I make this private then, now, the user of this class does not have access to that property directly. So how do we get them access to it? Well, we wrote a method that gave them access to it. And maybe in our method, we made sure that they weren't able to, if they can only run this count num dogs method, that method is still accessing the value that they want, but they can't change it by using this method. The only way that we can change it is if I wrote something in my code that changed it. Okay? So the idea behind private is that we keep these variables private to this class, but somehow we still have to give we still have to give them access, whoever's using our class, access to read or set as we want to control it. So let's look at a different example. I'm going to elaborate on this some. Okay. So I'm going to take the code that we've already written, and I'm going to add I'm going to add a private method, or excuse me, a private, it's not going to be a class variable, we're going to make it we'll make it a instance variable. We're going to make a private, let's see, we're going to make it a double price to bathe. So let's say that we're going to keep track of how much it costs to bathe this particular instance of a dog, okay? Let's set a default price. Let's say all of our dogs default to $25. Okay, so remember when we created these constructors and then we have a method that is increasing our number of dogs each time a constructor is run? Well, let's at the same time set a base price, a default price. Price to bathe equals $25. Okay, so now every time an instance of a dog is created, number of dogs variable is a counter. It's being increased by 1. It's private, so I can only do that here within this class. And then because I've written a method that is available publicly, they can see how many whoever's using our class can print this out, but they can't change the number of dogs. All right, so let's see how we can control our setting of this variable. So we create what are called getters and setters, or accessors and mutators. Let us do this. Let's create a we're going to create a public method and this is going to be our setter. So we're going to set our spa price based on public set spa price. We're not going to return anything. We're simply going to set the price based on the weight of the dog, for example. So in order to run this method, you have to send in a weight. Okay? And so now let's do something like if weight is less than 10 pounds maybe, then the price to bathe is only $8 because it's a smaller dog. Okay, maybe you want to make it twice as much because it's a smaller dog. I don't know, but you get the idea. So now we have price to bathe was set with an initial value of $25. But if the dog is less than 10 pounds, we are changing the value of that price to $8. Okay? So this is how we're accessing or changing a value of a private variable. Now all the user has to do is, if they wanted to, let's say, dog 2 dot, and it's going to run our set spa price. It has to return a weight. Maybe it's a 95-pound dog. Okay. So now when we print out, we don't have a way to print out the price, do we? So we have to give our users a way to print out their total spa price. So we call that a getter. Get the value. So I'm going to write public void get spa price. Because we're not, we are returning something, aren't we? We're returning a price, which is a double, right? So we don't have to receive anything, but now we have to be able to, maybe we'll just, instead of returning anything, why don't we just print it out? We'll make it easy on ourselves for now. So now system.out.print line, and now we want to print out price to bathe. And now we have access to price to bathe. Okay? Or if you wanted to actually do a return, this is one way to do it. Or if you want to return a value, maybe you want to be able to do something with it, and then we'll have to return price to bathe. Okay? So somehow we have to give since we've made this private, if this variable value is only available within this class, we've set a way for for whoever's using this class to set this variable or get the value that's in the variable. We don't want them to access price to bathe directly because we don't want them to have the ability to go in there and just change price to bathe to 0. We want to have control over what price to bathe is, and so therefore we give them access to a method that sets the price based on our own criteria, and then we give them an ability to get the value. Okay? So now we should have access to dog 2 dot get spa price. And I don't remember, I guess we were actually returning something, so we're going to have to create a price equal to get spa price. And then maybe system.out.print line and price. So something is, so there we go. Okay, so now we should be able to, I'm going to comment this out just for lack of confusion. So now we should get, the dog is 95, so we should get 25. Price to bathe is $25. And let's try our example of 5-pound dog. And we'll run it for the 5-pound dog, and we should get 8, which in fact happens. But remember that the user using our class cannot do dog 2 dot and then set the price. Price to bathe. There's no such thing. They don't have reference to that, so they can't do equal to 0 to reset their balance. So the idea behind encapsulation, the idea behind allowing ourselves to put code in private variables that are accessed only to our class is exactly that. We can, with our constructors, set default values, but we also make sure that our users don't have access to certain fields that we don't want them to tamper with. But we also have to make sure that we give them a way if we want. Maybe we don't want them to be able to set the price, or the price is never different. If that's the case, if the price is always going to be $25 regardless, then we could just get rid of this whole thing altogether. And now we don't have the ability to change that price at all. It's just going to always be a constant. So you have to make those kinds of decisions. But the bottom line is we now have control over what goes into that variable, but we still give the users the ability to see it if that's what we want. Maybe we don't want them to ever see that, in which case you wouldn't write a getter. You could keep it completely as a, whatever you need to do, but you get the idea. So you've got getters, you've got setters, and encapsulation is this idea that we have variables that are available only within our class itself.